Hello, welcome to another episode of Rebecca in Progress. I know it's been a while, all right, but I had a lot of stuff going on and I was working some stuff out. But we're here and we're ready, and I'm gonna give you an episode. If you're watching this on video, you are in for a treat. If you are a listener, I'm really sorry, but you're gonna miss like a really good slideshow. I recently spent a week documenting the creation of a small, traditionally burned dugout canoe or Mishoon. In my language, which is Shinnecock, Mishoon means canoe, and I'm probably gonna go back and forth between that throughout the course of this. Shanae Bullock and Shane Weeks, who are both Shinnecock, as well as Darius Coombs, who's Mashpee Wampanoag, are cultural keepers and traditional craftsmen. And they created a small 13-foot Mishoon for the Long Island Children's Museum and their upcoming exhibit, Saltwater Speaks. And I was there in a couple different capacities. I'm a Shinnecock person who is like curious and interested in learning about our traditional ways. And I really like to support my people, especially the people my age. Shane and Shanae are both around my age. I was also there as a documentary photographer whose calling and job and greatest love in the world is documenting and sharing Shinnecock history, culture, current events. And lastly, I was there as an aspiring filmmaker who was commissioned to create a short little 1 minute video on the process. So I'm going to tell you about the process first. And I know I'm going to say we a lot, but just know that my involvement was pretty hands-on off because I was holding a camera most of the time. I did not help with this fire in the slightest. But I was there every day for a few hours. So we. So the first thing was getting the log to Shinnecock. Darius had this like 13-foot piece of white pine. I think it had already been debarked. He got it in Massachusetts. He brought it across the Long Island Sound, had to transport it across Long Island, to bring it to the Shinnecock Powwow grounds. It was placed onto these two smaller pieces of wood, that worked as a like stand to keep the piece of wood off the ground completely while we worked on it. Then Darius and Shanae used chainsaws to sort of like shape the log into a canoe. Like they rounded the edges basically. Whatever the water equivalent to aerodynamic is. And I'm sure if I thought about it a little bit, I could think of what it is, but I will not. I'm not gonna lie, I'm a little iffy on the next step because I did miss it, but I know that they flattened the top of the log by chopping the top off. And then I think they carved out basically like wooden bricks from it to kind of continue to shape it and to give it a place to burn and also to have something to burn. So they didn't just like set fire to the top of that big piece of wood. And I know I didn't explain that well, and I'm sorry to the people who are watching. And there's no photos of that, but I missed it, so I'm doing the best I can. And then I missed the second thing too. But then they lit it. And I think they basically lit fire to like those bricks that they had carved and like sticks and twigs and things like that. And then over the course of the next 3 days, the crew watched and monitored and kept the fire under control as it slowly like burned the log down and formed into a canoe. And it was a 24-hour job. It was a live fire. Someone had to be there to watch it. And I think it was Shanae specifically pulled all the overnights by herself, just like watching the fire. It was a small canoe because it has to fit in the museum exhibit space, but also it's intended for kids to sit on it and like interact with it. And because it was so small, it took a record 3 days to finish the initial burn. And because it's made for children, we had Shinnecock children come out and help. So we had the Boys and Girls Club of Shinnecock and the Winnichinook Shinnecock Preschool. They came and they gathered cedar leaves, and then they made brooms with them, and the kids got to sweep up the ashes once like it was done. And then they were also the first people who got to sit in the canoe. And then a couple days after everything was done, they lit the outside of the Mishoon. So then they could like carve culturally relevant designs into the side, both to make it look nice and some cool like sensory stuff for the kids. So, the log was brought into the Powwow grounds on April 11th. I think the burn started on April 12th, and then April 21st, they took the canoe, which is named Pewea or Lil Pine, into the water here on Shinnecock. And of course, the Shinnecock community came out to support. And then, super cutely, my nephew, Zayden, was the first person to, or the first kid to get into the canoe. And he's like 8 years old. And he, I think, volunteered, but then I also think he was kind of scared to paddle. And I feel him. And it didn't sink, and that's what matters the most, it didn't sink, it was a successful launch, it was really fun. I think there might be some more work that needed to be done, and I feel like as a person who doesn't know anything about boats and canoes and wood, that you probably have to coat it with something to, like, water seal it, but also to smooth it out because children are gonna run their hands over that, and you don't want splinters. So I'm sure there's more to it. I know, we're supposed to be gifting the canoe to the Long Island Children's Museum soon, and we're scheduling that, and that's gonna be very fun. And all in all, it was just like this really amazing, beautiful experience, and it was like an honor to take part in it and be there the whole time. I've seen Mishoons before, and I've seen them made before, and I'm like 99% sure that I've seen Darius actually make one at Skimitzen a few years ago. But I've never really been involved in the process. And there was a lot more to the process than just the burn, honestly. There was also a camp. So the crew also created like a little campsite and like a little outdoor kitchen. And it was just like a nice place to like sit and gather and talk as native people. There was a ton of Shinnecock visitors, and Darius and his wife and daughter are Mashpee Wampanoag. Like I said, Mashpee Wampanoag is one of our sister tribes. I actually have some Wampanoag ancestry. My grandmother's father was from Mashpee. And then we also had other guests from other tribes. So we had someone from Aquanase come, and someone from Menominee came, along with a bunch of other people. So there was a lot of conversation about the similarities and differences in our nation. So, like our culture, our tradition, our food, our language, our just like general way of life. We talked about our ancestors and how they would have lived on the land we stood on, and how different it would have been, how like fresh their food would have been. And there was this day specifically when the Long Island Children's Museum people came, and we had like a little feast for them over the campfire. There was like striped bass and goose and clams all cooked directly on the flames. Um and a pot of clams was at some point put down in front of me, and we're trying to like find a bowl or something so I don't have to eat directly out of the pan, out of the pot. And Tootie, who's Darius's wife, she said something about how like, well, we could eat this whole pot. And I could, and cut to 10 minutes later, and I'm just sticking my hands in a new pot, taking out clams and eating them directly, like the Shinnecock person that I am. And then also that same day, like earlier in the day when I walked up to the camp, sorry to anybody watching this on video who might be a little squeamish, but it's really not that bad. I walked up to camp and there was a dead hawk in a plastic bag on the table. And I was like, wow, look at that dead hawk in a plastic bag on the table. Whose is this? I look around, I see Shane, and I say, you know what? I bet that Shane's dead hawk in a plastic bag on the table. And sure enough, towards the end of the day, I look over and he's showing his girlfriend how to like process this dead hawk in a plastic bag he had on the table. It was just like the most res thing I could have imagined, and it was beautiful. I loved it. The fireside talks weren't all about tradition and culture and like Mishoons and stuff. We talked TV and movies and food and life and travel and hobbies. Shanae's dad showed up one day and he cooked a corn muffin in a orange peel. That was a topic of conversation for a number of days. It was great. But like mostly there was just so much laughter. You get enough native people around each other and they're just going to laugh so hard all the time. It was just this, like, really nice experience, and I felt really good every night when I came home. Like, physically, my body was hurting, not gonna lie. I was wearing Timbs every day, standing on dirt for hours. Honestly, it's been weeks. My legs do not feel great still. But I remember every day falling asleep so good and just feeling so fulfilled every single day. Just like nothing but good medicine. And now we're going to talk about documenting the process of all of it. So I'm predominantly a photographer. That's my main interest. But I've done a few videos. And I have a lot of video equipment. I'm always think to myself, you'll make videos if you have all the equipment. So I have like tons of video equipment. And then Shanae specifically asked me if I was interested in making the video to accompany the Mishoon for the museum. And I figured it would be really good practice and also it would be a really good paycheck. So the cameras I used were two Sony A7 IVs. The lenses I used was a Sony 24 to 70 GM2, a Sony 35 GM, a Sony 16 to 24G, and a Sony 70 to 200 GM2. The 24 to 70 was mostly used for static shots on the tripod. Every once in a while there was some handheld shots with it, and pretty much any close-up footage that I got was used with that. And then I think pretty much all the photos I took were also with that lens. I rented a DJI RS Pro 4, or is that it? DJI RS4 Pro. Um, and that is a gimbal. And on the gimbal, I had a 35 millimeter and it stayed on there the entire time. I had never held a gimbal before. I didn't really do any research. I didn't really know which one I needed. I ended up with something that I think honestly was overkill. And it was a pain to balance. And I didn't want to do it. So I kept the 35 on there. And so I just had to balance like the one thing every time I put it on, but I was not willing to switch lenses and not willing to figure out all the rest of the settings. The 16 to 24 was also used on some static shots. We had an idea to film the Mishoon from the same spot every day, but like by day 2, it had already burned down so much that you could no longer see into it overhead with the 24 to 70, so I had to bring in the 16 to 24 to like really really get close. And then the 70 to 200 was only used for photos on the launch day because I couldn't find the ND filter for that lens. I know I own it, I just can't find it. And I didn't look super hard, but I don't know where it could be. Some other equipment that I used was Rode Wireless Pros for the interviews. And then I used the Atomos Shinobi to monitor the video, but only on the 24 to 70 because like I said, I don't know anything about gimbals and I did not understand how you're supposed to put the monitor on the gimbal. So we didn't use it for that at all. There was also some footage taken with drones. One was a DJI Mini 3, and I think the other was a DJI Air 3. And then lastly, I rented a Zoom H6 recorder. I rented that for Shanae. She had an idea that for a separate project, she wanted to record some ambient audio of the site when it was kind of like quiet and there weren't a lot of people. So, the crackle of the wood and the scraping of the shovel on the wood, the birds and the wind and like maybe chatter and laughter when she did kind of have guests when it was a slow time. And for the most part, I filmed a lot of this by myself. Looking back on it, I did not have to do that. I have really experienced friends, specifically experienced Shinnecock friends, who very much could have helped me with it, and I could have reached out, and I'm sure they would have said yes. But like for whatever reason, when I looked at this project and when I was planning it out, it seemed like a really good challenge for myself. And it like really was a challenge. There were so many moving parts and just so much happening all the time. And it was like super, super stressful. And then it was more complicated than my previous videos because all the other videos I've done were kind of simple. They were mostly like some static shots. There might have been a little handheld footage scattered in, but for the most part, was sitting the tripod down and filming a scene in front of me or filming a person talking to me. This was not that. I imagined the project having a little bit more depth, and I really did want to show movement, which was the main reason that I bought the gimbal. I did not care for the gimbal. It was heavy and it was big. Um, but I'm probably gonna buy a DJI Mini 4. It looked really cool. And it seems really helpful to have it in my kit so I don't have to really deal with rentals again. Also, the stuff that I rented from lensrental.com, which is where I rent all my equipment. They're really good. This ain't sponsored. I'm a nobody, but it's a really, really good website if you want to rent any sort of production equipment. Highly suggest it. But also, like, filming didn't go as smoothly as I wish it had, but I think that's just everything I've ever done. Um, Kind of off topic, but I made a post asking if there were any unexperienced and interested people who wanted to learn like photo for a couple shoots I had coming up. And I was like, you have to be good with chaos because shoots are always just so chaotic. And this was no different from it. There were, like, a lot of little inconveniences, there was, like, some missed shots, there was some unfocused shots, there were some badly exposed shots. It was, like, super windy all the time, and then the day that I filmed the interviews, it was a really beautiful day on Shinnecock, and when it's a beautiful day on Shinnecock, the boys are out on their quads and motorcycles and dirt bikes, and they just kept driving past the power grounds over and over and over again, which I understood it's the best place to drive fast because 'cause I've done it. But it was so loud, and it took so long to, like, just film these little interviews, way longer than it needed to be. And then there was this, like, other issue with because I was so preoccupied with filming every day, and I didn't bring my additional cameras. Like I said, I had 2 Sony A7 IVs, but I also have some Sony APS-C cameras, and I didn't bring them because I haven't used them in a really long time, but then, like, both of my cameras were being used most of the time that I didn't get to take as many pictures as I wished I had. There were, like, a lot of scenes that only exist in video, and I wish they also existed in photo, and there's so much more that could have been in this slideshow for you video watchers, but I couldn't do it because I was so focused on, like, getting these shots. But also, if you are from the Long Island Children's Museum and you are listening to this video or whatever this is, this podcast, don't worry about it. Don't worry about it, okay? It's good. Editing is coming along fine. I took an obscene amount of shots, okay? I look back at my files, there's just so many incredibly repetitive shots. So don't worry about it, okay? It's coming. The video is gonna be so good when I'm done with it. But this was a really big learning opportunity for me. And I learned so much. And honestly, like I said, one of the biggest things I learned is I don't have to do things on my own. Like, what is that about me? I could have used more help, but I did have a little bit of help. And I want to thank everybody who did help me with the drones and the gimbals. So Ferdinand Lee, Jalen Smith, Tyler Collins, Jeremy Dennis, and Shane Weeks all came through and helped have some extra hands, have some extra gear, um, to get this project done. And I couldn't have done it without you guys. So what is next with this whole thing? So like I said, one, the Mishoon is going to be in an exhibit sometime this fall, I think. And then Shanae and Shane will be making another Mishoon in September. This one I think they're going to be gifting to Shinnecock, so it's going to stay on territory. And I'll probably document that one, but I'm going to do it with a team and I'm going to do it with more knowledge of how everything is going to work. I also really do want to sit down with both Shane and Shanae in like an interview podcast type situation. um, there's there's so many more things I could have talked about. There was so many details that I chose not to say today because I think it would be better coming from the experts, the people who actually made the Mishoon. So be on the lookout for that episode. I'm going to post a few links into the show notes so you can support Shane and Shanae, their social media handles and things like that. I do not think Darius has a any social media, but I do have his email address, so you can hire him as a cultural educator if you are interested. Lastly, I would like to thank you for listening. Um, I urge you to honor Native folks by listening to us and hiring us and paying us to do our cultural practices and inform you of our cultural practices. Um, Thank you, Tabutne, and we will talk soon. Thanks.